Hi, this is Tom Mura from World Class Coaching with another in our series of animated drills. This is an activity that I discussed on the podcast, episode 161 of Coaching Soccer Weekly, and I'm putting it in the show notes for the listeners there to be able to kind of break it down. But if you haven't heard that podcast, you can go back and listen to how I incorporated this activity into the session that I did on kind of training attacking patterns to give players ideas. But the basic way this works, and I don't want to represent that I created this, that I came up with this. This is some information that I kind of gleaned from some different sources and pulled together. But there's a really good live action video on this that he actually runs through with the players that I'd recommend. If you just search for pattern play, attacking pattern play, you'll probably come up with it as I did. But I used it within a session that I described on the podcast, and this is how it works. So you've got, here I've represented these as mannequins because I have them inside the Academy Soccer Coach software. We've got mannequins here. In my actual practice, I used training triangles from Bob Warming, and kind of the training triangle method that he's developed, and the actual triangles that take the space of a player on the field. It doesn't give you the vertical height of a player because they're flat, but it takes up the physical space on the ground that a defender would take up, and it gives you a reference point for your players. And if you're not fortunate enough to have mannequins and be able to move them from field to field, they're a great alternative. So I set them up in this same manner. Then the team is set up with two holding mids, an attacking center mid, wide attacking mids, and a striker. So for me, this is set up for a 4-2-3-1, just without my back four, basically. You could also do this with my 9v9 team. I've done this because these are two center backs. This is our holding mid. Then you've got our attacking mids and a striker. So all we're missing is the wing backs in a 9v9 formation. I could actually do this with my under 9s and under 10s that play 7v7 because we play two defenders, a center midfielder. We don't call them a holding midfielder, but that's what they basically should be. Then two outside mids and a striker. So the format is the same. The shape of the team is the same, just going from one age group to the next. Now, I'm not saying that you could or should even do this with under 9s. I've seen it done with under 10s. I think one of the videos was actually a U10 team doing it. So you could definitely do this with them. I don't think I'd spend a ton of time on this, but just to give them basic attacking ideas, I think this is great. I think the majority of the time with young players should be spent on technical activities. This is technical if you think about it. It's more team-related technical. It's the passing and receiving and moving and combination play. But still, so here's how it works. So the ball starts with one holding mid, and then it's played into the attacking center mid. And we want that player checking away and checking back at different angles. You can even have the ball start with this player on one side and have them switch it to this player, then allowing this player to time their movement to come in and show for the ball. So then the ball is played out to the other midfielder. When that happens, then a couple of things happen all at once. We've got the player here on the outside, our wide midfield player, is going to check out and create just a bit more space and open themselves up. Then we've got the striker who's going to make a run here. They're going to time their run to then kind of come away and come back to fill this space. Likewise, this center midfielder, this attacking center mid, is going to make a run around this mannequin in order to come back in underneath and support the striker receiving the ball. The ball is actually going to be played from this holding mid into the striker who's checked for the ball. Then the ball is going to be laid back to this player, all right, before it's played wide to the wide attacking player who has made that run there. Now they're able to run onto the ball and receive it. So they've gone wide and now they run onto the ball before then serving that ball either between defenders or behind the defenders. And we'll just take that away real quick and we'll make it a passing line, which is what it is. They're playing that ball in behind the defenders for the forward to then make their run onto that ball. So obviously the forward has got to then, time their run to get back here. So they've laid that ball off and now they're going to time their run to get back into the space to receive it and then finish on the end with a shot on goal past that goalkeeper. Now we're using this back four as our line of offside, so all of the movements have to be timed accordingly. Obviously, there's a lot going on here. I suggest drawing it out for the players first. If you've got a tactics board, I think that's a great way to start because it'll allow the players to kind of see where the ball is going, but nothing works quite so well as actually doing it. And once the players do the pattern a couple of times, and you'll see that this only happened on one side, you can and should have this player on the far side supporting the play by making a run into the box as that ball's getting wide. So, that way if the ball is missed here, then they can follow on and finish it on this backside. But it's that same basic pattern that we're repeating time and again to get the players to understand the movements. The timing of those movements is probably the hardest part of this. I've also found that it's difficult at first for the players because they're focusing on the movements, their technique struggles. And so you've got to come back and really work on the technique again and focusing on, making every pass in front of your players. I guess if they are having too much trouble on the technique, then you should roll this back and go back into the hourglass pattern that I talked about on the podcast, as well as there's a video of that on the YouTube channel here that you can check out as well. But the next pattern we do is the same idea. It's actually a little bit simpler, but the pattern being play in, play out. Then when we've got this wide midfielder opening up, what we want now is we want the ball played directly from here out to that player, obviously in front of them, all right, so they can receive it there. And now what we want is a ball played into this striker. Now we want that striker coming away from the space before making the run in. Ideally, the pass from here would then go either, splitting defenders would be great, or in behind two defenders so that then that player can make their run into that hole before finishing. This is obviously a much simpler pattern. I like to do the more complicated one first, and then this one is a bit easier for the players, and it allows them to have, a wide option now rather than playing through. So if you think about it, all of the player movements should really be the same. When this ball, comes wide here, when that pass is made to this holding mid, that's the action that should trigger this forward to come in and check into this space as this player is moving wide. So that motion is still the same. Now this player receives the ball in this wide area. Now this player should time their movement to either get back into here or to check out in order to check back in to receive it in behind. So the basic movements are still there. It's just the destination of the ball slightly changes. So the final of the three patterns that I've used with my teams is a pattern that allows us to have the attacking midfielder and the striker change roles. All the movements are the same again at the beginning. Ball's played in, ball's played there. We've got the forward checking into that space. The wide attacking player opens up to create that space. But here's where it gets different. Now the ball is played into this striker, but the ball is then laid out wide to that wide attacking player, leaving space now in behind for this player to turn. And normally I would switch the person around. Let's do that. Let's give you another person. And so we've got this player, making their run through to then receive a ball that's either bent in behind the defense, played in. This is kind of showing it's kind of played over the top, but what I want to see here is a ball played in behind for this player to make a run through that gap, or perhaps even this player takes the ball down the line. All right. So they're kind of attacking the end line. And as they attack the end line, that gives time for that attacking center mid to get into that space so that we can play a ball in behind the defense to then be finished on goal from there to this player running in. But the key action here is I want these players seeing that they can change. This player can come short in order to receive the ball and lay it off, leaving room for that attacking center midfield player to make the run through and receive the ball. So this basic pattern, we've given the players three ideas: how to combine through the middle and then wide to get it through, but then also how to get the ball wide earlier and play a ball in diagonal, and then finally how to have players rotating positions based on where the space is created by checking players. So the final kind of way to do this in order to make sure your players really understand it is to give the players the choice of what happens. The only thing they don't have a choice of is this first ball. This first ball is played into, we'll get our center midfielder back here. This ball is played in here and it's played out wide. From there, it's the player's choice. They can decide whether they play early to the wide player that's checked out, whether they've played here. Then this player that has received the pass can decide, are they going to lay it back to this attacking center midfielder who's turned and made their run underneath. They've come underneath. I didn't want to move him. I wanted to draw a line here. They've come under here to show for the ball, so the ball can be laid back to that player, or the ball could be played out wide, so it could either be laid back here or played out wide there. And so all of those patterns that we've just done are up to the players to decide how they want to incorporate those into this activity. Then finally, you start taking the mannequins away. You start adding real players. The way I start taking the mannequins away is I take the center midfield mannequins away first, and I add in defenders into those roles. So we take those players out, or those pretend players out, those mannequins out. And now we bring in 2 defenders. And then what we want to look for are the same patterns, but obviously the players are going to be able to make their own decision because we can't force the ball to be played in directly into that attacking center mid every time, because then these defenders will just sit on them. So the ball can be switched to the other side, and then it can be played wide for players to check into space and players to run in behind. It's up to the players what combinations they see to break these 2 defensive players down and get a shot on goal. What I also like to do when I add these players, and I didn't talk about this on the podcast actually, is to add counter-attacking goals here. So if the defenders win it, they can counter into these goals. As the players get better, what do? We add more defenders. The more they get to kind of an understanding of the play, now we'll have them attack against 4 players, even 5 players, to try to then break down those players and get shots on goal. I always leave this back line intact so that we've got that's your line of offside, are these central 2 players, and then we've got these mannequins that are just kind of taking up space and giving us reference points up to where to play players or play balls through. So I hope that explains it well for those that listen to the podcast. Hopefully that paints a better picture than I was able to describe. If you haven't heard the podcast, go check it out at coachingsoccerweekly.com. If you haven't been on the YouTube channel very much and you're seeing that for the first time through this video, then go and check that out from the podcast. You'll be able to see a lot of the activities I've talked about on the podcast are here on the YouTube channel. So thanks a lot.